My name is Richard Kandawire. I'm the Africa Director of the Alliance for African Partnership, an MSU initiative that is committed to working closely in partnership with a range of African institutions. I'm also chairman of the National Planning Commission in Malawi. I am based in Malawi. I would like to welcome attendees from across Africa and also from across the shores of the world to this side meeting. And I would like to particularly welcome our keynote speakers as well as our panelists to this side session for the 2020 Norman Borlaug. The session we're focusing on is towards sustainable agriculture productivity, soil health, and resilience in Africa, an agenda for research and action. This session has been jointly convened by the following organizations: Michigan State University's Alliance for African Partnership, the Regional Network of Agriculture Policy Research Institutes in Africa, IFDC, and the African Development Bank. We appreciate that we as African institutions are able to join into a coalition of the willing from global organizations that are responding to African leaders' efforts in advancing the agenda of agriculture transformation and food security. We appreciate in particular the commitments of the African Union Commission, particularly the Commission for Rural Economy and Agriculture, and through the leadership of Her Excellency, Madam Commissioner Josepha Sako. I believe she is joining us shortly, and I'll be introducing her later on. But allow me, I think, to proceed while the Commissioner is joining us later, to proceed to introduce our keynote speaker. And this is the distinguished Professor Ratan Lal, the 2020 World Food Prize laureate. He is Distinguished Professor of Soil Science and Director of Carbon Management and Sequestration Center at Ohio State University. Professor Lal has mentored over 112 graduate students and 182 visiting scholars. He has received numerous prizes, including the Glink Award Prize, the Global Confederation of Higher Education Associations for Agriculture and Life Sciences Prize, among many others. He has also very deep connections with African research institutions, both in terms of capacity development, but also advancing the science, particularly in the field of soil health. We're truly honored to welcome this distinguished scholar, researcher, and a very passionate believer in advancing African agriculture. So allow me to call upon Professor Lal, the distinguished professor from Ohio State University, to give us his keynote. Professor Lal.
Connecting. Thank you for the introduction. Can you hear me, please? And can you see the slides?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Once again, I greatly appreciate the opportunity to join this very elite group discussing issues which are of great significance for Africa and the world indeed. The topic I'm going to talk is given here, priming Africa's agriculture, which I think is very critical. Oops. Food security in South Asia had a similar situation as we discuss these days for Africa. I do not know what the problem is. Sorry, we have some technical issues. Hopefully it will go on. Okay, we had for Asia, a book came out in '68 indicating we have yet to meet anyone familiar with this situation who thinks India, for example, would ever be food self-sufficient. There was another book called India Cannot Be Saved. Bangladesh is a basket case. And we know now that some of those predictions did not come true. Countries in Asia, in fact, have become food self-sufficient and exporter. And the same questions arise these days. Who will feed Africa? Will Africa produce the food, or will feeding Africa become a global challenge? That was a very recent article that came out. And the challenge, of course, is aggravated by the disruption by the pandemic. So will Africa be the next Cerrado miracle? What happened in Brazil, for example, 30 years ago, nobody had known Cerrado could become such an important food production center for the world. So is that possible for Africa? With the political willpower to translate science into action, and by empowering farmers through pro-farming policies, I personally have a strong belief that indeed Africa will be the next bread basket, not only to feed itself, but also for the world. Africa spent $65 billion in 2017 to import food, and this money could have been invested in promoting science-based agriculture to food produced locally. And with the adoption of improved agriculture, such as that proposed in the AAA in Marrakesh in 2016, Africa can be food self-sufficient for now and future population. And that is the basic hypothesis that I'm going to discuss with you this morning. To achieve that, what are the challenges that we must address? First, we already have 1 in 4, 1 in 5 persons in Africa hungry at present, and the problem is being aggravated by the COVID-19 pandemic. Soil degradation is an issue, and achieving its neutrality is important. Preserving forest and natural resources, enhancing ecosystem carbon stock so that we can mitigate climate change and adapt to climate change. Restoring degraded and desertified soils and ecosystems is an issue. And of course, mitigating the climate change, especially in relation to the drought. Drought is a major thing. I showed the picture previously, the farmers cultivating the land by a hoe. So the question many times arises, will every farmer in Africa have to surrender to the tyranny of the hoe, or can things be improved? And I think restoring and sustaining soil physical health by increasing soil organic matter content, improving, restoring biological activity of macro, meso, and microfauna can alleviate drudgery, because soil structure, soil health, mechanical issues will be improved. Adopting a system-based conservation agriculture can control soil erosion, prevent crusting and hard setting, and improve also the plant available water, what we call green water supply. Using cover crops, I used mucuna, centrosema, stylo, pigeon peas. I used those as crops to improve soil quality, physical structure, root penetration, and also suppress weeds. In fact, we were very successful in suppressing weeds, even along in Prata with mucuna, and very successful without even the herbicide use. You had to grow it for 1 or 2 seasons, but it was able to do it. I think there is a very positive trend, which I'm very pleased to share with you. We have been thinking that the population of Africa may become as much as 4.2 billion by the end of the century. A recent estimate shows that it may probably level off at 3 billion. Now that's a 1.2 billion difference in population. And that is because of the decrease in what they call fertility rate. And the fertility rate obviously depends on the education. Education, especially of the women, empowerment of the women through education so that they have control on their own destiny, especially the reproductivity. And that to me, a report which has come out is a very significant one that the population increase will probably level off sooner than we thought. Then there is this question of yield gap. We have a tremendous what can be achieved and what exists now. Corn, for example, can be tripled very easily. Same thing can apply to sorghum. It can be increased by a factor of 10 to 20. Same thing applies to upland rice. At least it can be tripled. With irrigation, things can really become very significantly improved. Irrigation can increase productivity by alleviating drought by a factor of 3 in most cases, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. So we have what can be achieved, what is being achieved under research condition, even when I was working there 30 years ago, and what is actually happening on the ground. And that can be done by translating science into action. So we know that it can be done. We know that research-wise, it's possible. Africa currently imports about 20% of its cereal needs, which with business as usual may increase to 50%. And somehow the present cereal yield is increasing at a slower rate than the population growth. And hopefully this can be changed. 250 million people, that's 19% of the total population, are food insecure. And the problem is worsened by pandemic. So in a way, that is an urgency because pandemic is already here and is affecting the food security. So how do you feed Africa by 2050? One of the things we talked about in Marrakesh in 2016 was the AAA initiative. Because we thought the population will go up by 2.5 times, which at least until 2050 is still the case. The demand for cereal will approximately triple. In addition to the total yield gap closure, other approaches to eco-intensification and avoiding deforestation are possible. And they include the following: empowering farmers, especially women farmers, to adopt best management practices, which we know, and increase the cropping intensity. Increase irrigated production area, which is tremendous potential need to be achieved. Improve, enhance soil nutrient supply and green water reserve. Green water is the plant available water capacity in the root zone. Irrigation in Africa can alleviate a drought and can double or more triple crop yield of the rainfed conditions by irrigation. Only 6 to 7% of cropland in Africa, 13 million hectares, is presently irrigated, compared with 14% in Latin America, 37% in Asia, and some countries maybe 50% in Asian countries. So highest priority should be under irrigation, sub-Saharan Africa. The drip sub-fertigation rather than the flood irrigation, the micro irrigation can save the water and at the same time energy and the fertilizer use. The nutrient part is another issue. Global fertilizer use is 135 kilogram per hectare. Fertilizer use in sub-Saharan Africa is 17 kilogram per hectare. We got to increase this rate to make sure the nutrient supply is met. Sub-Saharan Africa is 20% of the world's arable land, but it consumes only 2% of the world's fertilizer. I know fertilizer can be an issue, but only 2% and 17 kilogram in impoverished, depleted soil is not a very good option. Somehow, soil fertility has also to be improved. Soil degradation in Africa is another issue. 65% of cropland, 30% of grazing land, 20% of forest, 26% of all land in Africa is already degraded. Serious land degradation accounts for about a quarter of the land area in sub-Saharan Africa. About 180 million people who are living on the land, that is prone to some form of degradation. Increase in erosion risk may be even much greater in Africa, 36%, possibly more by 2100, compared with the world average of 14%. And in fact, the biggest factor of food insecurity in Africa is soil degradation, soil health, and soil organic matter content is the critical factor for that. Population in African cities is increasing tremendously. Accra, over a period of 50 years or so, population increased by 5 times, Addis 7 times, Dar es Salaam 10 times, Kinshasa 11 times, Lagos 8 times, Nairobi 8 times. So somewhere urban agriculture has to become very important. We must plan to produce 20 to 25% of fresh food within the city limit by recycling water and nutrients. And that is an important policy issue. Here we are at the moment. Traditional agriculture, slow increase in crop production, where we are supposed to be is at that level. This yield gap we must meet. We know the technology. The question really is how to translate what we know into action. And I hope that we will discuss that. Especially we should try to make sure while the food production is increasing, the environmental sustainability is not left behind either. In Asia, unfortunately, environmental part has been left behind, and it is something need to be addressed. Soil health, I must say, organic matter content, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, several parts of Eastern Africa, Horn of Africa, is rather poor. It should be somewhere between 3 to 4%, and most of the time is less than 1%. So what I would suggest as a roadmap for feeding Africa, it is doable, it must be done. We are now in 2020, fertilizer use 17 kilogram, we should get up to at least 60 within 1 decade. Irrigated cropland area 6% now, we should try to reach it by 20%. We must have for each country these goals spelled out on 5-year basis. Conservation agriculture, I think at the very optimist, we think it's 1.5 million hectare. It should get up to 50 million hectare or close. Agroforestry, 10% now, should be at least 20%. I think we need to plan on a region by region basis, on a country by country basis, these goals that we must try to achieve. And they must be achieved. There are many other things that we can do with vast endowments of natural resources comprising of a wide range of climate, biomes, soil, and human capital. Excellent human capital. Therefore, Africa has the capacity, potential to be a breadbasket. But I want to repeat the words of Dr. Norman Borlaug. He said, you can't eat potential. That is correct. We must translate knowledge into action. I cannot overemphasize that part. A widespread ecosystem-based adaptation of what I just mentioned, what we should do. Emphasis on soil restoration, zero net land degradation. We make sure soil are restored, soil health, carbon sequestration is an important component of that soil health. And above all, somehow we must empower farmers, women farmers, 70% of them in sub-Saharan Africa. They must be given the resources, capacity, land tenure, access to credit, and access to all the inputs to enable them to adopt the best management practices. We must strengthen somehow political willpower to provide the effective governance. Political willpower and effective governance is key to all that issue. I think we can really impact some kind of transact, develop a benchmark location to manage these resources. And with proper management, I am confident, I'm sure, just as it happened in Asia and in Central Mexico and elsewhere, Africa can become and should become, must become breadbasket, not only for itself, but for the rest of the world. I'm sure this discussion, if translated to action, will help us achieve that goal. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Professor Lau. That has been a really very insightful reflection, which provides some promise that Africa has the capacity to move towards sustainable agriculture productivity and become become food secure as a continent. We take your point particularly around the need for political will, and we have actually persistently from within Africa advanced that agenda that we need African leaders to really be the champions of agriculture transformation. And that bridge between scientists like yourselves and many others is absolutely fundamental to the future of agriculture transformation and that commitment of additional resources. We were expecting the Madam Commissioner, Joseph Sako, to join us, but I am not sure whether she has managed to join us.
She has joined already.
Fantastic. So, well, allow me definitely to welcome the African Union Commissioner, Her Excellency, Madam Josepha Sako. She's a Commissioner for Rural Economy and Agriculture of the African Union Commission. In her many past responsibilities, Madam Sako also served as a special advisor to the Minister of Agriculture for the government of the Republic of Angola. For many years, she also served as a Secretary General of the Inter-Africa Coffee Organization with a special mandate of representing the interests of 25 African coffee producer countries. Madam Sako is a well-known figure in advancing the agenda of transformation of agriculture in Africa. She is now championing for a revisit of the Abuja Summit of 2006 on fertilizer. And in her remarks, she will be addressing the need for how best we might actually begin that conversation in terms of moving away from moving the agenda of fertilizer and some of the changes that have taken place. She'll be working, of course, very closely with African institutions that are represented here. So allow me to welcome Her Excellency, Madam Commissioner Josepha Sako, to give our keynote and additional remarks. Over to you, Madam Sako.
Thank you very much, Professor Richard Nkanda. Good evening from Addis Ababa. Good morning, maybe from the States, wherever you are. Good afternoon. I would like, first of all, to thank you for really inviting me, and Professor Tom really gave us really a very, very good, insightful, presentation, which I was really, saying that my continent we still have the hope, we are not charity, we have the potential. With this esteemed panelists, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, and all protocol duly observed, I would like to thank the consortium of institutions comprising Michigan State University, Alliance for African Partnership, Regional Network of Agriculture Policy Research Institute, and the International Fertilizer Development Center for partnering with the African Union to organize this event. I am delighted for the invitation to deliver this keynote address. Thank you very much for your really confidence on your Commissioner for Africa. I am a Pan-Africanist, and I believe in my continent, born in Africa, and I know all the 4 regions of the Southern African region. I was born in Angola. Angola has the 2 privilege to be right from the central and also the Southern Africa. I was brought up in Central Africa. I school in West Africa. I was school in West Africa, and I worked in West Africa. Now I am in East Africa. I'm really characterized to know the geopolitics of my continent. With this, first, let me acknowledge my fellow panelists. Uh, I am truly honored to be among this group of high accomplished scientists, and I saw it, my previous speaker, and a practitioner who will be dissecting the issue before us today. And we have already seen it by just the opening section. As an accomplished agronomist in Africa, I am particularly delighted about the title of this event, Towards Sustainable Agricultural Productivity. This morning I was in a webinar because we are going to celebrate on the 15th of October, the International Day of Rural Women. And they are the one that give us 80% of our food. The productivity aspect, we need to transmit it to them. So agricultural productivity, soil health. Soil health is very important. How is climate change affecting, the degradation of our soils? We are going to look at it because I'm with the scientists, and resilience in Africa. We are having a lot of shocks. Even pandemic of COVID is another shock. How do we build back better? I'm very happy with with the team of these events. An agenda for research and action, which also aptly capture the mission of the African Union's Department of Rural Economy and Agriculture in particular. Without research, we cannot go anywhere. We need to have research to innovate and to use technology. Ladies and gentlemen, as you are aware, part of rural economy and agriculture leads efforts to promote sustainable environment management, because it's not only agriculture. Even though the issue of environment management in CADEP is not very clear, but we are trying to the new reform to build a strong department of rural environment management. That environment, we will not achieve our Paris Agreement. And agricultural development, by boosting member states' rural economy development and agricultural transformation through supporting the adaptation of measures, strategy, policy, and program on agriculture. Blue economy. We have 37 countries in Africa that are coastal, but we are not unlocking the potential of blue economy. Hi, your Commissioner for African Union on Agriculture, Rural Economy and Agriculture, really fought in less than 1 year. We have a strategy to start unlocking the potential of our blue economy. We can export the marine resources, the sea resources, but also in a very sustainable way. So blue economy, it's another value addition for African economic growth, has been added to our portfolio, because before reform, everybody was doing blue economy, and it is a cross-cutting issue, but now is under the leadership of this department. With the ongoing reform of the African Union, as I say, as part of our mandate, we spearheaded the implementation of key Agenda 2063 continental framework, such as the comprehensive, the CADEP, the country, everybody knows CADEP. I believe even children that were born in 2003, they know CADEP. African Agricultural Development Program, together with our the NEPADs. We've been really championing and doing a lot so that we can transform our agriculture, and with all the effort, of course, of our partners. especially relevant to this for this event. Let me also note that the DREA spearheads the African fertilizer financing mechanism. I am there, I am committed, because as we saw from the presentation, my previous panelist, my colleague in the panel, the previous panel, he told us we are not reaching the 50 kg per hectare recommended by Abuja Declaration. The African Union's interest in issues of soil fertility, soil health, goes goes a long way. As you may be aware, in June 2006, the African Union Special Summit of the African Head of State and Government adopted the Abuja Declaration on fertilizer for the African Green Revolution. A primary focus of the Abuja Declaration was to increase farmers' access to and use of organic fertilizers. Since then, member states have made good progress in meeting some of the agreed upon targets. Yet, even in the aftermath of Abuja 1, studies have shown that on average, fertilizer use in Africa is still far below level needed to approach potential yields of many key food crops. In addition, there has been increased recognition of the critical role of soil health and complementary soil and crop management practices in both improving the efficiency of fertilizers use and achieving higher and sustainable gain in crop productivity. The importance of achieving significant gain in food crop productivity in Africa remains paramount as changes in the African agri-food system and rapid population growth, it also say, have led to projection that the continent demands for food, the demand is increasing, cereal, will more than double by 2050 relatively to the 2010 demands. But we have 60% of arable land. If there is priority in agriculture and investment, we can achieve it. Both the challenge of achieving these gains and the potential implication are exemplified by the fact that the majority, 70%, of agricultural growth in agriculture since 2006 has been due to cropland expansion, while less than 15% has been due to increased productivity. Further to this, the COVID-19 pandemic has made worse an already precarious food insecurity situation in a number of African countries. The devastation on African agri-food system caused by COVID-19 combined with recurring floods, this is climate change, flood and droughts, and emerging threats such as locust invasion in East Africa should serve as a reminder that we cannot sleep on the job. Achieving significant and sustainable gain in agricultural productivity will require continued growth in public and private sector commitment to invest and policies that facilitate development of private sector led fertilizers supply chain, as adoption, of a a more holistic approach for productivity. Include acknowledgement that fertilizers it is only one among a number of complementary agricultural inputs and soil and crop management factors that together contribute to improvement in soil health and crop productivity. Nothing that the agricultural and fertilizers landscape in Africa has changed significantly since the 2004 Abuja Declaration, and in recognition of the above challenges, African Union Commission, through this department, REA, has initiated continental conservations that will lead to consolidating gains, experience, and lessons generated from the implementation of the 2006 Abuja Declaration. This conservation will culminate into what is now being referred as the Abuja 2 Summit through though Nigeria has indicated that it is not ready to host the event. If it was not for COVID, we were all in Abidjan, and we started from Accra, and we decided to have the Abuja 2 Summit, and we will have it by the grace of God. The second fertilizer summit will be a platform that will help consensus for a fertilizer and soil health plan of action to enhance sustainable agricultural productivity through and productivity growth and resilience in Africa. The African Union is grateful to the consortium of institutions comprising MSU, AAP, RINAPRI, IFDC, and others that agree to provide the required technical coordination to support the preparation for the convening of the Abuja 2 Fertilizer Summit. In preparation for the second summit, these partner institutions have undertaken analytic work to assess progress made since the 2006 Abuja Declaration on Fertilizer for African Green Revolution, identify critical pathway and the strategy for realizing the transformative potential of fertilizer and soil health for sustainable agricultural productivity and resilience to meet the needs of African farmers, consumers, and market. Assess best practices and innovative market-based approaches for building robust input and output market for a broad base of farmers and other agricultural value chain actors. To conclude, as the African Union, we are excited to partner with this institution to prepare for the second fertilizer summit, and we will provide all the support needed. We have high expectation, we have high expectation for the summit. By the end of the summit, we will be looking for resolutions and recommendations on how African government can provide sustainable increase in crop productivity. Here are a few questions that we hope can be answered at the summits. How best can government make long-term investment in infrastructure, research, and development and extension? Because without infrastructure, we are having all these post-harvest loss. Without research, we cannot even have, a resilient, adapted crops with the climate change. and development in the extension, our farmers, they need to get really, knowledge on the new technology and innovation. Today we are talking about digitalization. All this is very important. How do the government facilitate policy and regulation that makes prices to commercial fertilizers and complementary input affordable to a broad base of farmers? All this we need to have a question, an answer for that. What are the action and interventions that encourages private investment and trade in fertilizers and complementary inputs, including the risk in fertilizer supply chain? For government pursuing large-scale input subsidies program, how can they adopt best practices regarding the design and implementation of such programs to ensure that the programs both meet their stated goals and are cost effective in doing so? With this, I really thank you for your kind attention, and I leave this reflection to all of us because we need to answer. This is our generation. This is our time. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Shukran. Muito obrigada.
Well, thank you very much, Your Excellency, Madam Sako, a truly strong, powerful Pan-Africanist and African citizen. We appreciate your passion and your commitment to agriculture transformation, and we truly look forward to the planned Abuja 2 event, and be assured that the African institutions presented here and their willing partners across the globe will join you in your efforts in advancing agriculture transformation in Africa. We will be having further discussions with you, and I'm sure we'll walk this talk together. Much appreciated. Without further ado, let me call upon again a very eminent scholar from Michigan State University, Professor Sieg Knapp. She's a professor of soil science and cropping systems ecology in the Department of Plant and Soil Microbiological Sciences at Michigan State University. She founded the Global Change Learning Lab in Sub-Saharan Africa. She's a leader in extension scholarship, including developing participatory global learning platforms. She has provided leadership in cutting-edge research in a number of countries within Africa, more particularly Malawi and Tanzania. So allow me to welcome the presentation from Professor Sieg Knapp. Professor?
Thank you very much, Richard Mukende-Wiri, Madam Professor Lal. This is such an honor to be here today. And with no further ado, I want to also thank the Alliance for African Partnerships that has supported myself, but also Professor Diamond Kambewa from the Longway University of Agriculture and Natural Resources. We'll be hearing of some of the really innovative work as a case study in Malawi, but it's also, there's an ongoing, I would say revolution is the right word for it, in agricultural innovation, particularly around soils, extension, and policy. As we heard from Professor Lal, there's need to move from knowledge to action. And this next generation of farmers, of policymakers in Africa are doing exactly that. So as we move into the second summit, I think we have some really exciting opportunities. Instead of just trying to get fertilizers to farmers, we can now look at how we translate that into increases in yield despite a changing climate. How do we rehabilitate soils so that we have both mitigation and adaptation to climate change. So I'm going to focus on this case study, and it shows how handheld devices, smartphone apps like LAMPKS, are empowering what I would call citizen science. That is, farmers right on the ground working with extension educators are now able to diagnose their own soils. Imagine if you were a farmer or a policymaker trying to empower these farmers, and you only had historically somewhat vague maps. Remote sensing has upgraded these, but has often smoothed them and averaged them. And so in a village, it'll be seen as low organic matter or high organic matter. And yet we know within one village, some farmers have rehabilitated their soils. They're using the agroforestry and conservation agricultural practices, and they are building soil health. Other farmers are on the precipice. Their degraded soils don't respond to fertilizers anymore. How do we know which is which? What recommendations can extension make? So these handheld devices are doing exactly that. They are using remote sensing to upgrade the local knowledge. That's why we call this citizen science. These in turn are uploaded and improve the soils maps for everyone. So take, for example, the soils grids AFSIS on the left here. You can see how it's quite vague, and the soil organic matter looks around 1.5%, 1% everywhere. In the middle is a map you could get if you could do gold standard lab combustion. In other words, send a soil sample off to a lab. I remember years ago being with farmers in Malawi, where I've been privileged to work since the early 90s. And we brought information back to a farmer a year after we'd first sampled it. And I was really apologetic because it took us so long to give him that information. And he was just actually overwhelmed. And he turned to me and said, "Madam, actually, I have never gotten information back. You always come and take my soils, and this is the first time I'm learning about my soils. So we have to do better." And fortunately, we now can. And the extension led by Lilongwe University of Agriculture and Natural Resources, professors such as Diamond Kimbewa, are training a generation of extensions so that they can actually do in real time, using handheld devices, provide information to farmers in an inexpensive and timely way. So if farmers need to rotate because their soils are highly degraded, they need to use compost or tailored fertilizer, nitrogen and phosphorus. If it is a very high organic matter and responsive soil, then this recommendation can be made. So we've actually gone out to almost 600 farmers. By we, I mean actually we trained a dozen extension educators. So this wasn't a project. This was Malawi Extension doing what they've, which is to provide those recommendations in real time. Each of the extension educators on their own went to about 20 farmers, walked the fields with the farmers, and made these recommendations that you see here now. Only about a little over a third of farmers should put fertilizer on those fields. We do have many degraded soils, as we heard from Professor Lal, but some are managing to improve their soils. And so now we can diagnose that in real time. So you can see this shown here, depicted on the top left is a high organic matter soil. This is buffered against climate change. It can cope with flood or drought better. It can respond to fertilizer. You can see the woman with the really responsive, good maize. But other farms, you can see how diagnosis is showing us really a low organic matter, and they need to use agroforestry systems such as double up legumes with pigeon peas shown here. They need to rotate. This hyper local information can empower farmers to make the right choices. But how do we scale that? Well, extension is key. including educators from private and public sector, from NGOs. They have historically had a somewhat top-down approach. So as recently documented by Professor Diamond Kembewa, master farmers in the 50s and 60s were seen as the way to inspire others. But many farmers felt that they were just not capable of being that. So it was an approach that was then addressed through training and visiting, still somewhat top-down in the 70s. Most recently, in Malawi, there's been a shift towards farmer-oriented innovation. This is an inclusive approach. So youth, women are now empowered to make choices. And by empowered, I think the real revolution is in terms of giving them actionable information about markets. Hopefully we'll have better information about weather. That's been harder to get because we all know how hard it is to predict the weather. But until now, we couldn't diagnose soils in real time. But now with these devices that are only about $400, and with 2 days training, Extension can get out there and provide real timely information about soils. So this will help spark this revolution in soil rehabilitation. We need to also be able to reach farmers through ICT. So innovations such as Viamo and Airtel are now doing in Malawi, providing information that is targeted to different locations to say, now's the time to plant your maize, now's the time to apply side dress or fertilizer. So these text messages and voice-activated information can really support farmers. They have the diagnosis, the citizen science that's now helping them help each other by building good detailed soil maps for each village. And then this timely information that can be provided on markets, on how the weather is unfolding each year. Because some years putting on fertilizer, it can cause challenges. Other years you need to really put on enough to support a really good year with good rainfall. So voice activated can support response farming, which we need in this time of changing climates. And this revolution can be inclusive as long as people have access to cell phones. Finally, we need an enabling environment. Policy has to get it right. So Dr. Soweto Liverpool-Tassi from Agricultural Economics at Michigan State is leading a study of over 9 countries in Africa. What are their current policies? Looking in detail, many policies around soil fertility basically consider only fertilizer. Now, it's great to see that fertilizers are now more accessible to many more farmers. That is a miracle, and I am grateful for that. But if the response to fertilizer is not there, then we're wasting it and causing problems in our environment. So we need to combine this with attention to soil health, as we've been hearing. And we now have the tools to do exactly that. So as we build up to the second summit, I think we can put soil health and farmer innovation through extension and the policy to inform all of this right at the center of that debate. And again, I really appreciate the Alliance for African Partnerships for their support for this effort, where Dr. Diamond Kembewa and I are co-leading our platform for innovations in extension, ecology, and economics, so that we can see soil fertility at the center of this debate, but actually be able to do something about it, which is so exciting. And I'm really thrilled to see Africa in the lead. This case study from Malawi, and we're also working on one from Nigeria, I think will provide examples. And then this in-depth analysis of policy, we'll see how can we support the next leap in terms of an enabling environment. So if you are interested, you can go to the website on Global Change Science, East Africa Node, to learn a bit more. And I look forward with all of you to helping to see how we can support as we build up to the second summit. And thanks again for this opportunity to hear from Madam and Professor Lal on the really providing the stage, setting the stage for an African revolution that really is a green revolution. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Sig, for availing us and sharing with us this impactful research for enhancing agriculture productivity in Africa, and especially your groundbreaking research in Malawi, which is as good as ready for replication to the other countries. We also thank you in particular as a scientist for beginning to define a new vocabulary in science. Citizen science is certainly in the making in your work, or one might say democratizing science to make sure that citizens are part of defining their own research, solutions as well as interventions that can work on the ground. We truly look forward to your inputting into the work of the Commission as they move towards Abuja 2 summit. Without further ado, attendees and the panelists, let me move on to the next panelist, Professor Tom Jane, who is a well-known friend of a number of African research institutes. He is currently a foundation professor at Michigan State University, and also he serves as an advisor to the African Development Bank President, Akina Desina, in supporting the African Development Institute. He is actually a principal investigator for a new policy institute in Malawi that has been founded and committed to advancing policy research in agriculture and related sectors. Formerly, he was also at the center of setting up the Agricultural Research Institute in Zambia, known as the Indawa Agriculture Policy Research Institute. He's a passionate believer in building African institutions, and I believe that Madam Commissioner will be delighted to know that we have colleagues who are from northern institutions that are very keen in working closely with us as African institutions in driving our own transformation. So allow me to welcome Professor Tom Jane. Professor?
Prof. Mkandawiri, thank you so much, and greetings to all of you who are here with us today. Special greetings to the AUC Commissioner in Addis Ababa, as well as to the keynote speaker, Professor Lal, who I think by all accounts gave a wonderful keynote to get us started. As a panelist here, I feel that I should at least say a few words about the keynote. And I recognize some consistency between both Prof. Lal as well as the AUC Commissioner's talk in terms of 2 or 3 aspects. One of them is a sense of optimism. It is really wonderful to hear scientists and high-level representatives of the Africa Union speaking with optimism about the ability to overcome these challenges. Both of them have highlighted the yield gaps and the necessity of overcoming those yield gaps. Prof. Lal mentioned that 65% of our Africa's arable land is actually degrading or degraded, and hence the importance of soil health, as Prof. Sapp also emphasized in her talk. So I'm going to give a short PowerPoint here. And I hope that you can see my screen. Okay, and I've titled this to emphasize the necessity of pivoting from area expansion to productivity growth as a way to catalyze African agriculture. First, let's talk about the good news. It's very important not to lose sight of this, that there is evidence of unmistakable agricultural transformation in Africa. Africa has achieved the highest rate of production growth of all regions of the world, almost 3.9% per year, which is higher than any other region, as you can see, and about, quite a bit higher than the world average. So African agriculture is growing, and this is powering economic transformation in the entire region. This graph here shows you the correlation over time between agricultural growth, which is in the blue, and overall economic growth rates, which are in orange. And as you can see, when agriculture does well, it picks up overall economic growth in the region. When agriculture declines, there tends to be a dip in the region's economic performance as well. So what this emphasizes is the continuing profound importance of maintaining agricultural growth as a driver of economic growth in the region. Now, the downside is that most of that agricultural growth in Africa has been achieved through just expanding area under cultivation. And only a small fraction of it has been actual yield growth. So during the last 13 years, for example, in this bar on the right, you can see that in the orange that about little more than 75% of all of the production growth has been just expanding area. And that needs to change for many reasons. For biodiversity reasons, also as population continues to grow in rural areas, the ability to just expand area is limited in many parts of Africa. So there is a need to really focus on productivity growth, yield growth, and not just area expansion. Now, Africa faces many challenges for agriculture, but I'm going to just focus in the remaining time that I have on one of those challenges. And I think it's a very important one that's germane to this session here. When you look at farmers who are using fertilizer, when they're following researcher-managed trials that are sort of following the protocols of researchers in terms of when to plant, seed spacing, row spacing, when to apply the fertilizer, et cetera. These trials commonly show that farmers can get about 30 kilograms of maize or rice per kilogram of nitrogen nutrient. But actually farmers, when they're using their own management on their own plots, given the constraints that they tend to face, they get much lower yield response to fertilizer, commonly in the range of maybe 7 to 18 kilograms. So there's this major difference between what farmers could achieve under optimal conditions and what they're actually achieving on their own farm. And this, overcoming that gap about how efficiently farmers use fertilizer, could be one of the single most important things that the region could do and be working on to improve agricultural productivity and get yield growth moving in the region. I'm working with a number of colleagues on this issue, just to call out a couple of them. Pedro Sanchez, Bill Burke, Sig Snap, Jake Ricker Gilbert, and a number of others, Hambulo and Goma, looking at how to overcome this gap. So there are many issues that are important, but one of the single most important actions is to strengthen African agricultural research and extension systems. So extension systems are super important, as Dr. Snap had mentioned in her presentation before. But after a while, and Africa's changing, climates are changing. And so what constitutes best practices for farmers on a particular soil type or a particular agroecology, that may be changing and evolving. And it's going to be adaptive African agricultural crop science and veterinary science, animal science, all these things to help farmers utilize fertilizer more efficiently and get productivity from both animal and crop production. So this is the priority. and this is my last slide, Chair. Asian countries spend about 4 times as much per farmer on agricultural R&D than African farmers receive. And so it's no wonder that yield growth in Asia is skyrocketing. Well, it's moving forward. It's in Africa, but not nearly at the same pace as it is in Asia or in Latin America. So specific issues for crop R&D are location-specific fertilizer use recommendations, developing improved seed varieties, and recommendations for the use of organic inputs and soil management, which echoes many of the points that the keynote speaker had earlier brought up. My last comment here is that many donors tend to look for low-hanging fruit, and because of that, many of them have chosen to avoid actually investing in crop science and kind of supporting and encouraging and rehabilitating African-led science and R&D systems. But sooner or later, the failure to confront these national R&D issues is really constraining the payoffs to all other types of private and public ag sector investments to African agriculture. So this is a key point to be emphasized moving forward. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Appreciate your time, and I'll look forward to your comments.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Tom Jane, for reminding us that there is indeed a sense of optimism emerging across Africa. So it's not all doom and gloom in Africa. There are actually the science that is coming out and the technologies which are coming out, which can stimulate agriculture productivity. But also, there are also policy options that various institutions are beginning to present to decision makers to really stimulate agriculture productivity. And one might add also that we have very strong African leaders that are committed to transformation of agriculture productivity. And I think the question still remains on how do we make sure that we begin to target these strong leaders. Again, this is why we were delighted that Madam Commissioner is here, so that we begin to have conversations about these very outstanding research outputs that could be brought to the attention of our leaders across Africa. Without further ado, allow me to move on to invite another distinguished panelist, Dr. Martin Frejen, who is the Director of Agriculture and Agro-Industries at the African Development Bank. Dr. Martin Frejen has over 25 years research experience as a geneticist and a molecular breeder. He has worked in a number of CG centers, and we're delighted that, again, we as African institutions are in conversation with the African Development Bank to explore how based, as our own bank, so to speak, might be supportive to the agenda of agriculture transformation. So Dr. Martin Frejen, welcome to this session. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Professor Nkandawiri. It's a pleasure to join the rest of you on this distinguished panel. And Your Excellency, Ambassador Sako, it's also good to see you. Thank you for those very strong words and for the optimism. Also wish to congratulate Professor Ratan Lal for his winning the World Food Prize this time around. I recall very closely Professor Lal 30 years ago at IITA, was somebody we looked up to when we discussed soils in Africa. I also want to thank Professor Tom Jane and also Professor M6 Snap for sharing with us their experiences. I will be talking about what the bank has been doing lately with respect to improving productivity, soil health, resilience on the continent. And I will just begin by sharing my screen. I hope you can all see my screen now. Okay, can you see my screen? Okay. All right. So, as I said before, Professor Lal has given a very good background to what I'm going to say. So I'm going to cut a lot of slides from my presentation and just go straight to describing the AFDB's Feed Africa strategy and the AFDB's flagship Technologies for African Agricultural Productivity program, and then talk about some of the achievements. Also talk about how to build resilience through climate-smart agriculture, then go to the thorny point of how do we get agro inputs to farmers for improved soil health in a timely fashion and also in a cost-effective fashion. One of the biggest bottlenecks to getting Africa to move to 50 kilograms of nutrients per hectare is just the logistics and the financing and just the the policy all around inputs distribution to farmers. And then I will just show very briefly the bank's Feed Africa portfolio. In response to what Professor Lal talked about of a ever food import bill, the African Development Bank launched its Feed Africa strategy in 2016. It takes a value chain approach to raising productivity, value addition, and also marketing of agricultural products. I will talk very, very quickly about the most important flagship, which is which we call transformation technologies for African agricultural transformation. It's been well known that the CG centers and also national agricultural research centers and also even seed companies, private seed companies have developed a repository of technologies and expertise that can help raise productivity on the African continent. But the bottleneck has been the free flow of those technologies. For example, drought-tolerant maize has been around in Southern Africa developed by CIMMYT for more than 10 years, but only 20% of farmers use those drought-tolerant varieties. So what TAT is trying to do is working with seed companies, working with technology developers in 9 commodities: rice, wheat, maize, sorghum, high iron beans, orange flesh sweet potatoes, fish, poultry, and small ruminants, and looking to getting these technologies into the hands of 40 million farmers. First and foremost, we realize that the biggest problem is the policy environment. Often, varieties developed and released in one country cannot be used in the next door country. There's also cross-boundary difficulties, the movement of seeds and fertilizers. In addition, there's also a lot of problems around seed policies. Often seed policies, restrict production of foundation seeds to just governments rather than opening it up to the private sector. So TAT tries to, harmonize regional policies by getting the regional economic communities, sub-regional organizations to work together with the country to domesticate, policies that have already been accepted at the regional level in countries. The other component of TAT, very important, is delivery on a large scale of seeds, breeds, fingerlings, fertilizers to farmers in a very cost-effective fashion. This entails working with seed companies, both building a capacity before the season, in the season, and after the season, building their capacity also financially, and also strengthening them to be able to engage with other key players like agro dealers and making sure that seeds get to farmers. I'll just go over some of the achievements of TAT. To wheat, the heat wheat varieties developed by ICARDA, and which we all know that increase yields, double yields in the dry, arid areas of the Horn of Africa, Sahel and West Africa, and other parts of Africa. Working with a lot of stakeholders, 65,000 tons of heat-tolerant wheat seeds were produced in the last 2 years, and helped Sudan to increase its acreage by almost 100,000 hectares of wheat, and also Ethiopia increases acreage by about 20,000 hectares of wheat, leading Sudan to become like 50% self-sufficient now in wheat. Similar also for maize, working with a lot of seed companies, were able to produce 17,000 tons of climate-smart maize that was distributed to more than 1 million farmers. And then also very tied to this was what we call a soil fertility compact. There are very many methods of increasing yields just by applying fertilizer the right way. You know, you have the micro dosing, the lower picture, you have the deep urea placement that makes better use of fertilizer, more efficient use of fertilizer, and also ensures, you know, a better return for farmers. Soil fertility compact of TAT has been working very hard with a number of farmers, you know, to teach them these new methods. And also because the CG centers before now have always managed what we call innovation platforms of extensions and systems of governments, of seed companies, of farmers. And under TAT, this innovation platform have become a very, very important vehicle for delivering these technologies to farmers. In addition to what we're doing in TAT, we will also realize, as we have heard today, Professor Watalan has said, and also Professor Tom Jane has said, there's a lot of land degradation all across Africa. So we have several regional projects that is actually trying to recover degraded land. We also have the same projects also looking at introducing climate smart technologies, mostly drought tolerant, you know, maize or heat tolerant wheat varieties. These are very large projects. For example, the project in West Africa is $245 million in about 9 countries, working to deliver these interventions to a large number of farmers. There's also water management, especially water conservation in the very dry areas. This is a very, very important part of the bank's work, in addition to trying to raise productivity. But all this has been hampered by access to fertilizer. This slide shows you fertilizer use in many African countries compared to Brazil, India, and also the Netherlands. You can see very clearly that we are less than a quarter of fertilizer use in these other countries. And for obvious reasons, you know, the reasons why fertilizer it doesn't get to our farmers, or gets to our farmers really late, or the cost is just prohibitive, is multiple. But as the Commissioner for Rural Development and Agriculture mentioned, one of it is financing. The African Fertilizer Financing Mechanism that the bank hosts is one of those interventions to help finance the whole fertilizer supply chain. And one thing AFFM is doing is actually providing credit guarantees to all the actors in the value chain to be able to access fertilizer. There are already 2 credit guarantees projects approved in Nigeria and Tanzania. And they will, in Nigeria, about 200,000 farmers are being targeted. In Tanzania, it's about 500,000 farmers. But this is just the beginning. We believe very strongly that we will grow much bigger with these credit guarantees. Also, we have started to partner with the private sector. This is OCP, that's one of the largest fertilizer companies on the continent, to roll out credit guarantees in Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana. Again, targeting the key actors, in the fertilizer value chain, because if you don't provide financing to both the wholesalers, even from the importers, to the wholesalers, down to the agro dealers, if they don't have financing, there's no way they can stop fertilizer. They cannot stop fertilizer. There's no way the farmers can get fertilizer. This is a slide that was shown by the USAID Feed Africa and Feed the Future program. Shows the journey of fertilizer, the cost from manufacturer to the importer, to the distributor, to the farmer. You can see that the price more than doubles from the importer, from the manufacturer to the farmer. And all that cost is mostly due to inefficient logistics, also due to policy failures, both at the cross-border trade and also even at the internal trade. For example, rice is a strategic commodity in Cote d'Ivoire, imported rice, but fertilizer is not. it doesn't make any sense. So one thing that has been happening is that the bank has been working again with the regional member countries to see how to help to reduce more of this. One of the ways we're doing that is through digital. Digital also to make all the paperwork, no more paperwork, but more now accessible by by online, but also to use digital tools such as what we call the Farm Inputs Growth Enhancement and Resilience Support program to provide subsidies. So most of the costs that the farmers have to bear because of the inefficient logistics should be borne actually by government. And then you use ICT to make sure it's accessible to the farmers and it's not captured by middlemen. So the bank has rolled this out already in Togo. Nigeria was already being done, before the bank got involved, but it rolled out in Togo, in Liberia. There is also work going on in Senegal, and there's work going on also currently in Mali. And this input programs actually uses the cell phones or uses similar things to help the farmers know what agro-dealer to go to, know and receive a e-voucher that will help the farmers actually get fertilizer at much reduced cost. But there are many other opportunities for soil mapping. We have seen how Professor Six Snap showed that you can actually use a smartphone to determine the level of organic matter or nutrients in the soils. It has also been used to train farmers, as we have seen. It also can be used, to attract investments from the public and private sector, because it can be used to provide market and show the bankers that there's actually a revenue flow. Finally, the bank today manages about $4.5 billion worth of investments all over Africa, in all the key value chains, in all the major markets, both crop and also cash crops. But one thing that we're learning is that it is very, very important for each of the countries and for each of the regions to set targets, both for productivity, for access to seeds, for access to fertilizer and usage. We should all set targets, and based upon the targets we set, we should be able to monitor very closely, how much the interventions have been able to help to move towards the targets. That's one thing we're doing at the bank, to help to set. And we're working now with CADAP and the M&E arm of CADAP to ensure that the targets that are set are realistic. They're also very well measured, and then also the interventions also are properly measured, because one of the problems we have had in Africa is that there's been very, very poor measurements of progress of the interventions. We need to know what's working, what's not working. So we're working very closely with them, lots of partners. I would like to join also RENAPRI in this respect, setting targets. Without targets, we'll make all these investments and we'll not be able to say whether things have actually worked or not. Well, I'd like to thank you very much for your attention, and then we look forward to a robust discussion on how we can continue to help Africa, make progress towards in those targets of productivity, towards the targets of fertilizer usage, targets of irrigation, and other targets that will ensure food security for the continent. Thank you very much.
Well, no, thank you again, Dr. Frejen, for amplifying that message of hope for Africa and the commitments of the bank in feeding Africa. We as African institutions, and indeed with the guidance of the AU Commission for Rural Economy and Agriculture, we will be following up with you as a bank on how based you can actually be supportive to African institutions to advance some of these groundbreaking technologies as well as science. I'm sure there'll be questions coming up, but allow me, I think, to proceed and call upon Dr. Umar Kamara, who is the Regional Director for North and West Africa for the International Fertilizer Development Center. She has more than 20 years of experience as an agroeconomist. She has previously worked in various capacities in Washington, D.C., Washington State University, MSU, as well as the African Union Commission, where she was seconded to be part of the agenda on fertilizer as part of the follow-up actions to Abuja 2006 Fertilizer Summit. So over to you, Dr. Kamara.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'll try to share my screen. Let me know when you see it. Okay, do you see it? Richard?
No,
Can you see my presentation?
no.
Not yet, not yet, no, no.
Not yet.
Let's try this again, share.
Okay, yes.
Okay, great, thank you. So it's a great honor to be part of this panel today. Thank you very much for the opportunity to contribute. My contribution focuses on increasing the use of the right types of fertilizer to improve soil health and ag productivity in Africa. Enao and Banante have established since the first summit in 2006 that about 85% of African farmlands have nutrient mining rates of more than 30 kilograms of nutrients annually. So the nutrient supply must be replacing those depleting from the soil for us to close the yield gaps. So right now, are we on the track to do that? Fertilizer consumption in Africa is less than 3% of global consumption. And when you look at the top consumers, you see that consumption is concentrated among 4 countries in Africa. And those 4 countries all about 53% of the share. Fertilizer application rates have slightly increased since the first summit in 2006, going from about 878 kilograms per hectare to 16 kilograms, 17 kilograms per hectare. The good news is that the increase in demand has been mostly driven by higher application rates, intensification, and less by extensification. You can see on this map on the right that only 4 countries at the moment have reached the target, the Abuja target of 50 kilograms of nutrients per hectare. So not only are farmers not using enough fertilizer, but the little that they use is not of the right quality, the right type, and not matching the deficiencies in the soil. So you see a map of a nutrient map. This is a sulfur map of northern Ghana. And you see all the red areas where the deficiencies in sulfur are very significant. Same thing, same region, and this time is zinc. And these maps, about 8 years ago, we developed seminal maps for Ethiopia with the late Professor Tekanline and Dr. Marco Quinones. And when we received and we were looking at the results, we realized that we need a smarter approach to balance profitable and accessible fertilizer formulations to bring those to the continent. Fertilizer recommendations are, for the most part, outdated and inducing suboptimal crop response, which is a big disincentive for farmers to invest in the use of fertilizer. So with soil analysis, the mapping of deficiencies, the formulation of a new generation of fertilizers to address these deficiencies, and a transfer of fertilizer to farmers at an affordable price, you can achieve dramatic yield increases. you can really see on the chart on my on the right that you can achieve dramatic yield increases with the addition of secondary nutrients and micronutrients on top of the traditional NPK formulations. So when you look at rice and wheat, Rwanda, Burundi, you see the yield increment ranging from 1.1 metric ton per hectare to about 1.6 metric ton per hectare. This is significant. This is an opportunity for us to push the production frontier out. A few pictures to show you the difference in the field. This is wheat in Ethiopia, where you have NP only, and on your right, you have NP with sulfur, zinc, and boron. In maize in Zambia, look at the response between NPKS and NPKS with manganese, zinc, boron. Look at the difference in Mozambique with NPK, and this is NPK plus sulfur, NP, sorry, plus sulfur, zinc, and boron. So do we have the capacity at this time to produce crop-specific and site-specific fertilizer blends for farmers? And the good news is that since 2006, in 2006 first, we only had Nutore, one urea production plant in Africa. Today, we have two, and then we have significant phosphate production capabilities. You can see the production capabilities spread throughout the continent. And the more good news is that you have significant fertilizer market development projects in the pipeline. From the west to the east, south, I mean, fertilizer market investments are rising on the continent. The results of such investments are what you see here in terms of formulations that are specific to crops, specific to sites. This is from the 2020 Planting Food for Jobs Ghana initiative, and where the maps that I showed you earlier, Martin here, Freshene helped me get these maps to the Minister of Ag here. And the result is this. The next season, there was action taken. There was a clear acknowledgement that the government was subsidizing spending a lot of money in the wrong types of inputs, and that the inputs they were providing to farmers were no use. And so they went ahead and changed the formulation. So today, these are the types of fertilizers that are available in Ghana. You see sulfur, you see zinc, you see boron, you see manganese, and this is wonderful, and we'd like to see this in many more countries. How can we, as we invest in developing the capacity to produce the right types of fertilizer for farmers, we also need to invest in reducing the cost to move this fertilizer to farmers. At this time, African farmers are still paying the highest price for fertilizer around the world. It is cheaper to move the product across the world than it is to move it across ports in sub-Saharan Africa. And as Martin has just shown, there are a lot of inefficiencies along the fertilizer supply chain. This is the fertilizer cost analysis for Nigeria, and you see the various components of the price as it reaches the farmers. So you have inefficiencies in terms of the logistics. We have to look at the subsidy programs, investing in smart subsidy programs, those that involve the private sector, not crowded out. Fertilizer product policies and regulations, port inefficiencies, logistics. I mean, these are all types of inefficiencies that must be addressed. So to reduce this cost, we must invest in better roads, better warehouses. We have to reduce the cost of capital. And the Africa Fertilizer Financing Mechanism is doing an excellent job with that. We're improving the private sector access to affordable finance. And we have to reduce the cost of doing business and improve safety and security conditions. So I would like to conclude with this slide. I saved my best point for last. You know, this is a point that Dr. Lal mentioned in his presentation. You know, we have to look at this whole process with gender lens, and we cannot catalyze the transformative journey of the ag sector without applying a gender lens to the entire discussion. It will not be possible for us to address the productivity challenges without looking at the challenges that women face in having access to productive resources. So this is a quick example in northern Nigeria, northern Ghana, where women were beating on rice and they were singing. And of course, I joined in and I was trying to see how long I could last. I lasted 10 minutes, and the back pain I got from the activity lasted 2 days. And I know that when I asked some of the men farmers who were standing around watching this, why were women doing this? They say they liked it because they were singing as they were doing it. But actually they were singing to bear the pain, you know, to support the pain of the activity. So we must look at addressing the constraints that women face in this area across the sector to be able to really set us on the transformation path. With that, I thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Kamara, for again sharing with us some of the progress that has been achieved since the Abuja 2006 Fertilizer Summit, more particularly around the growth of some of the fertilizer markets across Africa. We appreciate your interventions. Lastly but not least, allow me to call upon Dr. Hambulo Ngoma, who is a research fellow at the Indawa Agriculture Research Institute in Zambia. He is a development economist with experience in climate smart agriculture and sustainable management of natural resources. Dr. Hambulo, over to you, please.
Thank you, Professor Mkandawire. Greetings to everyone, all protocols observed. Being the last speaker on the panel, I think it's a great honor for me because the eminent speakers before me have ably handled the main issues around the road to increasing agriculture productivity, addressing soil health in Africa. Allow me to just offer a few reflections on some of the issues that were raised by Professor Rao, the AU Commissioner Ambassador Sako, Professor Tom Jane, Dr. Frejen, Dr. Umar, and Professor Sig. And I want to focus my intervention on one particular pathway through which we can, move towards increasing agricultural productivity, improving resilience, and addressing soil health in Africa. And this is the issue of climate smart agriculture. I think this issue has come out from most of the speakers that have gone before me, but I want to mention in particular that Professor Rao identified climate smart agriculture, conservation agriculture, as a particular avenue through which we could use to attain these objectives of increasing agricultural productivity. So in a nutshell, I think it's well understood now that climate smart agriculture is a necessary condition for sustainably increasing productivity, addressing soil health, reducing poverty and food insecurity in the face of climate change. Climate smart agriculture could be thought of as technologies, agricultural technologies. It could be practices or policies that basically aim to achieve three things. And one is to raise agricultural productivity and household incomes. Second is to enhance climate change adaptation and resilience. And third is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The beauty with this side of the continent is that some climate smart agriculture practices like conservation agriculture are actually part of national policy in a number of countries in the sub-Saharan Africa region, and we could take advantage of this. However, there's an adoption problem. I think previous speakers have alluded to that fact. In fact, Professor Lau mentioned that as part of the targets going forward, perhaps we should aim at increasing the adoption of conservation agriculture to 50 million hectares. For most of these countries, I think right now we are talking about less than 10% of arable land. So then the question arises, how can we increase the adoption of conservation agriculture? How can we sustainably increase the use of fertilizers? How can we sustainably increase the use of improved seeds? In a nutshell, the question really is, how can we actualize sustainable agricultural productivity growth and soil health in Africa? And here I want to suggest three things that, again, have been mentioned by the previous speakers in various respects, but now I'm trying to tie them specifically to climate smart agriculture. And the first proposal I want to offer is a need to build institutions and supportive policy environment. This is important in order to facilitate appropriate CSA policies where these are lacking, and also to fast track implementation where policies exist but are not implemented. There's been emphasis so far on the panel that we need to move from knowledge into action. And most countries in sub-Saharan Africa have this common problem of having good policies that are never implemented. They never get to see the light of day. So we need to fast track implementation. And also there's need to foster coherence between natural resources management and agriculture policies in order to amplify synergies and minimize trade-offs. I think you heard Professor Tom Jane allude to the fact that most of the production increase so far in the region has been due to cropland expansion. That comes with its own environmental costs, but there are ways in which we could minimize the trade-offs and instead amplify the synergies. The issue of finance, Dr. Frejen from the bank raised it. There's need to raise funds to support scaling up and scaling out of appropriate CA practices, conservation agriculture practices, and also complementary inputs such as organic fertilizers, hybrid seed, mechanization, soil testing, irrigation, and extension. Some of these have already been highlighted by the previous speakers, the previous panelists. The second point I want to propose is a need to build evidence based to support climate smart agriculture and address the various risks that are faced by smallholder farmers. And the first point under here is a need for more spatially disaggregated evidence on what works, where, under what conditions, and on barriers to adoption and how to overcome these barriers and scale out proven effective climate smart agriculture practices. There's some notable intervention in this area. I think we heard from Professor Seig on what they're doing in terms of using ICT to better extension delivery, to provide soil testing. We heard from Dr. Frejen what the Africa Development Bank is doing. And also there are other interventions. For example, the recently launched project, Understanding and Enhancing Adoption of Conservation Agriculture in Smallholder Farming Systems of Sub-Saharan Africa, the ACASA project under ITA and CIMITI. These are interesting interventions that will help us get to the bottom of the question, get to the bottom of addressing the bottlenecks for uptake of some of these CSA practices. On the risk side of things, smallholder farmers have got high discount rates and in general are risk averse. So first and foremost, when they produce, their primary goal is to meet immediate subsistence needs and sell the surplus. So if adopting these new practices, these climate smart agriculture practices is seen as risk or perceived as risk or entails some learning, farmers may exhibit some aversion. So the question really is, how can adoption be supported or nudged in a sustainable manner What are the appropriate policy instruments in the short and medium term? And some of these interventions that I alluded to a while ago will help us in addressing some of these questions, which in turn will help to increase the uptake of some of these climate smart interventions. The third point is a need to involve both the private and public sector. Again, this point has been alluded to by the previous speakers. On the private sector, I think we need private sector to facilitate climate smart supply chains for organic fertilizers, liming, and also to offer soil testing services. This is important in order to inform site-specific input recommendations. In areas with input support programs, there's need for these to be implemented via flexible mechanisms that crowd in private sector participation. For example, through the flexible electronic voucher-based systems, that can allow farmers not only to redeem the usual, organic fertilizers and seeds, but other things, including lime, organic fertilizers, livestock amenities, and probably also allow them to access soil testing services. To summarize my intervention, I'm a strong believer that the future of African agriculture is green. The strong policy support around climate smart agriculture, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, suggests that it will remain an important option for transforming agriculture farming systems in the region, and we need to take advantage of this. We have to find means and ways of confronting head-on the adoption problem. We need subnational research in order to identify appropriate economic and biophysical conditions of different regions and agroecological zones, and to propose the most appropriate climate smart agriculture packages for promotion. We have to spend quite a bit of time in trying to identify and understand how best to scale up and to scale out climate smart agriculture effectively and efficiently. I thank you, Chair.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Ngoma, for, again, your insightful presentation, particularly around smart agriculture, climate smart agriculture. We now, I think, getting to the end of this particular dialogue. There are literally, scores of questions that have come from across Africa and across the globe. Not all of these questions will be answered now because time is not on our side, but I just want to take advantage in raising one important question that came from one of the attendees. This is to Madam Commissioner Josepha Sako. And I think the main question is, how can we bring to the attention of this rich research message of hope to African leaders? How do we bring this research to the attention of African leaders, particularly ministers of agriculture, most of whom may not be aware that there is actually good science and also good policies. So what are the ways we can bring this rich information to the attention of these African leaders? Madam Commissioner, would you like to respond to that?
She does not appear to still be with us.
Oh, she might have actually moved on. Is there anybody who can respond to that? Maybe at the bank. How do we bring this, rich science that has been generated by our scientists in Africa working together with their counterparts from northern institutions? How do we bring this to the attention of African leaders?
Well, thank you very much, Professor Nkandawire. I think there are three avenues to bring this, to bring the science, to the attention to the political leaders. One is what we call the STEM, that's the science and technology, the committees of the AUC. And these committees are made up of the agricultural ministers and then they hold their meetings, I think twice a year. And at that meetings, the AUC invites, scientists and also invites other policy experts to kind of advise them on what's happening. It's a very, very important avenue, and I really encourage, the scientists to engage with the sub-regional organizations, sub-regional research organizations, the SROs like CORAF, ASARECA, to engage with the AUC, on this STEM committees of ministers. Very, very important. But another way is, of course, CAADP, which Professor Nkadawuri, you led in the past, and you know very well. CAADP actually makes each of the countries make a commitment to use 10% of their total budget, on agricultural development. And then CAADP also has investment briefs, and these briefs are prepared by experts where both the technologies and also the economics and the commercial viabilities, of interventions are looked at. That's another way. CAADP is a very, very important way of doing that. But we should not ever ignore the networks, the policy networks, like a MERNAPRI and other policy networks, and many of them all around Africa. Very often, politicians and especially the ministers, consult with them as they design their policies. And so that's another way of them also. So those three ways I just mentioned, through the AUC committees of ministers, of technical committees of ministers, through CAADP and not through the policy networks, are ways we can ensure that this information, like the ones Dr. Omo was actually sharing about what happened in Ghana, the information is out there, but often it doesn't get to the ministers. So we have to look for a way to actively engage them. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Dr. Frijen. We will certainly, I think, advance that conversation further on how best we might engage our African leaders. There is also another related question here. What are the examples of scaling up commercial African agriculture and supporting agriculture entrepreneurs, particularly in Africa? Can we get a response from any of the panelists on how do you really scale up commercial agriculture in Africa and supporting
Richard, may I interrupt Harmon? This is Lal. I have another appointment at 1 o'clock in 5 minutes. So yes, please forgive me, I have to leave. So that, but I do want to assure you that I'm available for any follow-up that you may need and provide you any support that I can provide. I believe in your cause, and if I can do something, please do keep me informed. But right now there's a meeting beginning at 1 o'clock in exactly 3-4 minutes. Therefore, I would like to leave and attend that meeting.
Professor, can you share your PowerPoint, please? Can you share your PowerPoint presentation? We really like to.
I will try to send it later on, but right now I got to keep going.
Okay, yes, we will calculate it. Yeah. No, we appreciate, I think, the participation of Professor Lar as one of our keynote speakers. I think we're keen in following up with him going forward.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, much appreciated.
Bye.
So anybody who can respond to that question raised on how do we scale up commercial agriculture in Africa and how do we support these emerging agri-entrepreneurs to advance the agenda of enhancing agriculture productivity in Africa? Anybody who can respond?
Professor Nkadawuri, can I just share some of some thoughts from what we are doing at the bank?
Right.
A recent study by MSU, by Professor Tom Reardon at MSU, showed that 80% of all food consumed on the continent is actually handled by SMEs. SMEs, be as off-takers and aggregators to the farmers, as processors, as marketers, as third-party logistics, providers. Very, very important information. So, and we realize that SMEs actually are already investing their own money. They represent the largest private sector investment in agriculture on the continent. But very often, and maybe too often, these SMEs are hampered by a lot of policies and failures. from infrastructure, the rural roads, to the wholesale markets, to trade policies, to transborder, policies. They're hampered. So one of the things we have been doing at the bank is trying to understand, not just the bank, but even the World Bank and many other policy networks. I try to understand, what are the biggest, challenges that these SMEs face, and how do we begin to resolve them, working with governments to actually tackle them. That's one thing. Because we believe that if you take away some of those policy bottlenecks, like infrastructure, these SMEs will really do much better. They are the ones driving the agricultural expansion that Professor Tom Jane mentioned earlier. The second thing is also these SMEs need to be able to access, money at a lower cost, and also on a better term, that's the longer tenures. And this is something that development banks like us have had the difficulty tackling in the past, because SMEs often are just too small size, for the kind of financing that we do. So we have been looking at what we call financing for agricultural investments, or FAFINA in Africa, that actually tries to partner with other commercial banks, smaller banks, and even microfinance banks, and also partner with equity funds to provide financing. The USAID Investment Center is also doing a lot of work in this respect to the hand-holding of the SMEs, helping them access capital just by creating better feasibility studies. And also the bank also has what we call the Africa Fast Track Fund that also does a lot of hand-holding of the SMEs. But two things are very, very important. The policy environment needs to be improved, and the access to cost of money needs to also be improved. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. We really don't want to take too much of your time. We've already, getting to 2 hours limit. We have actually all these questions which we'll share with the panelists to make some responses to it. I think at this juncture, let me just allow myself to send our deepest appreciation to the keynote speakers, both Professor Lar as well as Madam Commissioner Josephat Sako, and all of you panelists. And of course, I would like to thank our audience from across the globe. I mean, we've had over close to 150 participants. We truly appreciate your participation. All these numerous questions will be responded to. We see this as ongoing conversation that will continue, and we will actually be sharing you a report on the outcomes of this conversation. But as indicated, this conversation is going to feed into the planned Abuja 2 fertilizer summit that is likely to take place in Addis Ababa. We are in discussions with both the African Union Commission as well as the African Development Bank and our colleagues from IFDC. And I'd like to thank them, as well as RENAPRI, the Regional Network of Agriculture Policy Research Institutes in Africa. And would like to give appreciation also to the Alliance for African Partnership colleagues at Michigan State University for facilitating this particular dialogue. Much appreciated to all of you attendees, as well as participants who were the panelists to this event. Thank you very much. God bless.